Arnold Schwarzenegger looked across the room at Keanu Reeves, smiled the smile of a man who already knew the answer, and said, "I bet you cannot lift that. Not aggressively. Not cruelly." With the easy confidence of someone who had been the strongest person in every room he had ever entered and had learned, over 50 years of being that person, that this was simply a fact of the world. Like gravity, like weather, like the particular quality of light in a California afternoon. The room had gone quiet. 37 people. A private fundraising event at a property in Brentwood. Film people. Industry people. The kind of people who had been in rooms like this enough times that almost nothing made them stop talking. They had stopped talking. Keanu looked at the bar. He looked at Arnold. He said, "Okay." He walked to the bar, set his grip, and in 3 seconds lifted something that no one in that room had expected him to lift. Arnold did not speak. His expression did not change. But something behind his eyes did. Something that arrived quietly and stayed, the way things stay when they are real. And what happened in the 2 hours that followed, between two men who had spent 40 years being different versions of the same question, became a story that neither of them has ever told publicly. This is that story. There is a property on Shalon Road in Brentwood, California, that belongs to a man named Gerald Forsyth. Gerald is 71. He made his money in commercial real estate. Sold his portfolio in 2009 at the precise moment that most people who had made their money in commercial real estate were losing it, and has spent the years since doing what men do when they no longer have to do anything. He hosts events, fundraisers, mostly, arts foundations, veterans organizations, medical research initiatives. He hosts them at his property because the property is extraordinary. 4 acres. Mature oaks, a pool house that seats 40, a view of the canyon that makes people stop mid-sentence, and because Gerald believes that the quality of the room you put people in determines the quality of the conversation you get from them. He has been hosting these events for 11 years. He is very good at them. The event on the 3rd Saturday of October was for the Paramount Veterans Arts Initiative, a program that pairs combat veterans with working professionals in the entertainment industry to develop their stories for stage, screen, and page. It had been running for 6 years. It had produced 2 produced films, 4 theatrical runs, and a documentary series that had aired on public television. Gerald had been its primary private funder since the beginning. The theme of the evening was strength. Specifically, the program's belief that the ability to tell your own story, to shape it, to own it, to offer it to another person, was a form of strength that the culture had not yet learned to value at the same weight as the kind you could see. 42 people had been invited. 37 showed up. Among them, by coincidence that Gerald would later describe as the finest accident of his 11 years of hosting, were Arnold Schwarzenegger and Keanu Reeves. They were not close friends. They were the kind of acquaintances that the film industry produces, people whose paths have crossed enough times over enough decades that the crossing has its own texture, its own warmth, its own history that neither party could fully reconstruct if asked. They had been at the same table at an industry dinner in 2019. They had both attended the same memorial service in 2021. They had not had a real conversation in at least 4 years. They shook hands at Gerald's door at 7:45. Arnold was in a dark blazer, open collar, the physical presence of him unchanged and unchangeable. Keanu was in a gray jacket, worn open over a black t-shirt. Dark jeans, boots. They went inside. The main event of the evening, before dinner, was a demonstration. It was Gerald's idea, and it was the kind of idea that only occurred to him. Because most people running fundraising events did not own a 135-year-old forge-iron log-lifting bar. The bar had belonged to Gerald's grandfather, a Cornish tin miner who had emigrated in 1911 and brought with him, among other things, a blacksmith's tradition of testing a man's grip and lower back integrity with a particular kind of deadlift. The bar was 5 feet long, solid iron, fitted at each end with fixed cylindrical weights that could not be removed. It weighed 227 pounds. Gerald's grandfather had lifted it. His father had lifted it. Gerald had lifted it once, in 1986, after 6 months of training, and had not attempted it since. He kept it on a low wooden rack in the corner of the pool house and told its story to anyone who asked. Most people did not try to lift it. A few did. Almost none succeeded. The demonstration Gerald had planned for the evening was simple. He would tell the bar's story, invite anyone who wanted to try, and use the attempt, successful or not, as a metaphor for the program's central argument. That the stories veterans carried were heavy. That lifting them required a different kind of preparation than most people expected. That the attempt itself was worth something. He told the story at 8:15. He told it well. He had told it many times. When he finished, he looked around the room, as he always did, to see who would step forward. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped forward. This was not surprising. Arnold was 76. He had not competed seriously in decades. But the body carried its history in ways that time adjusted rather than erased, and the way he crossed the room toward the bar was the way of a man who had spent his life knowing exactly what his body could and could not do. He set his grip. He lifted. The room responded the way rooms respond to that. A collective exhalation, a brief sustained sound, the specific warmth of watching someone who had earned the right to still be able to do something do it. He set the bar back down. He straightened. He looked across the room at Keanu Reeves, who was standing near the back wall with a glass of water, watching. The smile came first. Easy, the smile of certainty. "I bet you cannot lift that," Arnold said. The room was quiet in the way it gets when something has been said that cannot be unsaid, and everyone is waiting to find out what happens next. Keanu set down his glass. He looked at the bar. 227 pounds of 135-year-old forge iron, a deadlift, which meant pure posterior chain, hamstrings, glutes, lower back, grip, no leverage assist. No momentum. You bent down, you held on, and either it came up or it did not. Keanu was not a small man. But he was not Arnold Schwarzenegger. No one in this room, or any room, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. There was a woman near the front who later said she felt slightly sick on Keanu's behalf, not because she thought he was foolish to try, but because Arnold had said it with such absolute assurance. And because she had been in enough rooms with Arnold to know that his assurance was usually earned. Keanu looked at Arnold. He said, "Okay." He crossed the room. He took off his gray jacket and set it over the back of a chair. He was wearing the black t-shirt underneath, the one he'd arrived in. Nothing special, the kind you buy in a 3-pack. He rolled his shoulders once. He crouched at the bar. His grip, shoulder width. Fingers closed. He breathed once. He stood up. 3 seconds. Bar off the floor, locked out at the hips, full extension, held for a beat that the room also held. Then, set back down with a sound that was clean and controlled, and not the sound of someone who had barely made it. 3 seconds. The room stared. Not because of the weight, though the weight was real, and the lift was clean, and anyone who understood what they were looking at knew it. They stared because of what was on Keanu's face when he turned around. Nothing, not triumph. Not the particular tightening around the eyes that people do when they have proved a point. Not performance. He looked at Arnold the way you look at someone you are curious about. He said, "Where did you get that bet?" Arnold did not answer immediately. This was unusual. Arnold, in the experience of everyone in the room who knew him, was not a man who required time to answer. He had been asked every question available to a man of his particular history, and had, over decades, developed a response to all of them. Some polished, some blunt, all delivered with the velocity of certainty. He looked at Keanu for a moment. Then he said, "Same place, everyone gets it." He did not elaborate. Gerald Forsyth, standing near the wooden rack, read the room correctly. He said something warm and brief about the bar and the evening and the program. People began to move again, back to conversations, toward the bar in the other sense, in the direction of the terrace where the caterers were beginning to arrange the first course. Arnold did not move immediately. He was still looking at the bar. What most people at that event did not know was what the bar had cost Arnold to lift. Not physically. He had lifted it cleanly, and the cleanness was real. But there was a reason the bet had come out of him so quickly, so automatically, with so little thought. And it was a reason that had nothing to do with Keanu Reeves and everything to do with a version of Arnold Schwarzenegger that had existed long before anyone in that room had heard of him. He had grown up in Thal, Austria, a village of 1,000 people in a valley surrounded by mountains. His father had been the local police chief, a man who ran the household the way he ran his precinct, with order and expectation and a very precise understanding of what a son was supposed to become. His brother had been the preferred version of that son, athletic in the conventional ways, social, easy, the kind of boy their father could point to. Arnold had been large and strange and consuming in his obsessions. He had found bodybuilding at 15, because it was the one arena in which his size was not something to be managed, but something to be amplified. He had understood immediately that the only way out of Thal, out of the valley, out of the expectation, out of the particular kind of quiet that was not peace, was to become the best in the world at the one thing he had found that he could do. He had become the best in the world. He had done it by learning, very early, that the strongest psychological weapon available to him in competition was certainty. Not aggression. Not intimidation in its crude forms. Certainty. The absolute, performable, projectable conviction that he already knew the outcome, that the result was a fact waiting to be confirmed. He had used it for 50 years. He used it the way some people use humor, reflexively as a first language, before the slower and more deliberate languages came online. It had served him extraordinarily well. It had also, on a handful of occasions he did not talk about, cost him something. His brother had died in a car accident in 1971. Arnold had been at a competition in Munich. He had not come home for the funeral. He had sent a letter. There were people who had never forgiven him for this, and there were years when he had not forgiven himself. And there were other years when he had built the certainty so high and so solid that he had not allowed himself to feel the question anymore. His father had died the previous year, having never been to America, having never seen what his large, strange son had built there. Having not, in any language Arnold recognized as explicit, said the thing that Arnold had spent most of his life not waiting for. He had not spoken about his father publicly in 6 years. He was thinking about his father when he looked at the bar after the room began to move. He was thinking about the certainty, where it came from, what it had cost, what it was still costing, when Keanu Reeves appeared beside him. He had not heard him come over. Keanu was standing at the bar. Not looking at Arnold, but at the bar. The way you stand beside something when you want to be near a person without making the nearness into a demand. "Tell me about the lift," he said. Arnold looked at him. "The dead lift," Keanu said. "When did you start? How did you get the mechanics right?" It was not the question Arnold had expected. He answered it. He talked about the early years in Munich, the first coaches, the arguments about form, whether the back should be perfectly straight or whether a slight natural arch was acceptable. He talked about the grip and the specific feeling of the bar leaving the floor, the half-second when it was unclear whether the weight was coming with you or staying where it was. Keanu listened. He asked questions. Not soft questions, precise ones, about technique, about the difference between the way powerlifters approached the movement and the way bodybuilders did, about what happened to the lower back in heavy volume over decades. He knew enough to ask the right questions, which meant he had done the work somewhere and had his own relationship with the lift. Arnold said, "Where did you learn?" "Stunt training," Keanu said. "You spend enough years doing that kind of work, you either learn how to move correctly or you get hurt." John Wick. And before. But yes. They were quiet for a moment. Arnold said, "The bet was," he stopped. He did not usually stop in the middle of sentences. "I know where it came from," he said. "I have been making that bet since I was 19 years old, and it was the only thing I had. I do not always know when I am still making it." Keanu did not say anything. "There was a man once," Arnold said. "A trainer in Munich. Very good trainer. I was 19, maybe 20. I could not clean and jerk a weight I needed to clean and jerk for a competition. He watched me fail 4 times, and then he said," he paused. He said, with great certainty, that I would not make it. What happened? I made it. Arnold's jaw moved, the specific movement of a man who has won something so long ago that the winning and the wounding have become inseparable. I made it, and I have been proving him wrong every day since. Even when there is nothing to prove, and no one to prove it to. He looked at the bar. I looked at you, and I said the thing without thinking. That is not kindness. He did not look away from the bar. You did not deserve that. You came here for the same reason I did. Keanu was quiet for a moment. He said, "I know that bet. I have my own version of it." Arnold looked at him. "Mine is quieter," Keanu said. "It does not come out of my mouth. But it is there." He looked at the bar. "Someone decided something about me a long time ago, and I have been lifting things to disprove it ever since. Even when no one is watching. Even when I am the only one who knows." The terrace door opened. A brief sound of conversation came through. Laughter, the particular relaxed register of people who have eaten well and are beginning to talk about what actually interests them. Neither of them moved toward it. Arnold said, "Who was it?" "The person who decided." Keanu was quiet. "Not one person," he said finally. "More like a decade, a particular decade when the work was not going the way it was supposed to go, and enough people agreed about that, out loud, that you start to agree with them, even after it changes. Even when everything changes." He paused. "You still hear it sometimes." Arnold nodded, one slow nod. The kind that means, "I know exactly what that is." "You stopped hearing it for a moment," Keanu said, "when you lifted the bar." Arnold looked at him. "I watched your face," Keanu said. "When the bar came up. For that moment, you were not proving anything to anyone. You were just..." He stopped. "You were just the thing itself." Arnold was quiet. The sounds from the terrace continued. Somewhere out there, 35 people were eating Gerald Forsyth's food and talking about veterans and storytelling and the weight of the things people carry. Two men stood in the pool house next to a 135-year-old bar that neither of them needed to prove anything with, and said, for 4 more minutes, things that neither of them had said to anyone else in recent memory. Then, Keanu picked up his gray jacket from the back of the chair. He looked at Arnold. He said, "Go eat." Gerald spent a lot of money on that dinner. Arnold laughed. A real one. The big one. The one that came from somewhere below the certainty. The one that people who knew him well recognized as the sound of him being actually surprised. He put his hand on Keanu's shoulder for a moment. Then they both walked out to the terrace. Gerald Forsyth noticed them come out together. He was a man who had been watching people at his own parties for 11 years, and he had the host's particular skill of reading the quality of a conversation without having heard it. He could tell, from the way two people re-entered a room, whether they had talked about the weather or something else. These two had talked about something else. He did not ask. He seated them apart, as he had planned, at different tables. The dinner ran for 90 minutes. The program spoke for 20 of them. A veteran named Marcus, who had spent 3 years developing a stage piece about his 2 tours in Afghanistan and had performed it twice to full houses. Marcus was 34. He spoke without notes. He said, at the end, that the hardest part had not been writing the piece. The hardest part had been deciding he was allowed to. The room was quiet when he finished. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the first to stand. He started clapping. It spread. Gerald watched Arnold's face when he stood. He had known Arnold for 15 years, through several distinct chapters of a life that had contained more chapters than most people's. He had seen Arnold's public face and some of his private one. He had not seen this face before, or rather, he had seen it, but rarely. It was the face of someone who was not performing the response. Afterward, when the evening was ending and people were saying the things people say at the door, Arnold stopped next to Marcus. He said, "That took more courage than anything I have done in a long time." Marcus shook his hand. He did not know how to respond to that, and he did not try to. Arnold called Gerald the following week. He said he wanted to fund the program's next 3 years. Gerald said the number. Arnold said yes, without pausing. He said, "I want one condition." Gerald waited. "No announcement," Arnold said. "No press release. No naming anything after me." He paused. "I want it to be what it is, not what it can be made into." Gerald told him that was the easiest condition he had ever agreed to. The funding came through in November. It covered operational costs, the stipends paid to veteran participants, and 2 additional program directors. It also funded a new element that Arnold had specifically requested. A monthly session in which veterans who had completed the program returned to speak to veterans just beginning it. Not as teachers, as witnesses. Marcus was asked to lead the first one. He said yes before Gerald had finished asking. The session ran for 4 hours. 12 veterans in a room, half of them at the beginning of the process, and half of them past it. Marcus had one rule. No one told anyone else what their story should say. You could ask questions. You could listen. You could say, "Here is what I found when I looked at mine." Marcus called it the lift. He did not explain the name to anyone. It was just the name it had. Arnold has not talked publicly about what happened at Gerald's property that October. He has not talked about the funding. He has not talked about the pool house. He did one interview the following spring in which the interviewer asked him, as interviewers always ask him, about his legacy, what he wanted to be remembered for. He gave the answer he usually gave. The films. The career. The service. Then he paused. He said, "I used to think the most important thing I could do was show people what was possible. What one person could become if they refused to accept limits." He paused again, longer this time. "I still believe that. But I think I missed something. I think the question is not just what you can lift. The question is why you are still lifting it, and whether, after all this time, you know the difference between strength and the thing that looks like strength, but is something else." The interviewer asked him what the something else was. He said, "Fear that no one has found the right name for yet." He did not elaborate. The interviewer moved on, but a woman named Elena, who had been watching the interview at home in Sacramento, a woman who had been a veteran participant in the program's third year and had written a short piece about her father that had been performed twice and then published in a small literary journal, heard that answer and felt something clarify that she had been trying to articulate for 2 years. She wrote it down. It became the opening paragraph of a longer piece she finished 6 months later. The longer piece was published. Its opening line read, "Someone once told me that the hardest thing in the world is knowing the difference between what you are doing and what you are proving." Most of us spend our whole lives not knowing. She dedicated it to the program. She dedicated it to Marcus. She did not know who had funded the program's next 3 years. She did not know about October, or Gerald's property, or the bar. She did not need to. I have thought about this story for a long time. The part I keep returning to is not the lift. It is the question Keanu asked before anything else happened, before the pool house, before any of it. He looked at Arnold and he said, "Where did you get that bet?" Not a challenge, not a rebuttal, a question. He wanted to understand where the thing came from. He was interested in the origin more than the outcome. He was curious about the person, not the performance. I think that question is a kind of lift in itself. It takes something. It requires that you see the person in front of you as someone who has a history, that the certainty and the pride and the bet that came out automatically were not that person's whole truth, just the first layer of it. Most of us do not ask that question. We receive the certainty, and we respond to the certainty, either by being diminished by it or by fighting it. We do not ask where it came from, Keanu asked. And because he asked, a man who had been lifting things to prove something for 56 years found himself, for 4 minutes in a pool house, not proving anything to anyone. I don't know if that changes a person. I think it might. I think those 4-minute windows, when they come, are the ones that do the slow work, the work that no one announces, the work that does not get a press release. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for genuine curiosity, quiet strength, and the rare ability to see the person behind the performance. Drop a comment and tell me what stayed with you, not the lift, the moment before it, or the moment after, the one that is still sitting with you. Share it with someone who has been proving something for too long. If stories like this one belong in your week, subscribe. There are more coming. See you in the next one.